The mimosa tasted like acid. I watched a single bubble trail its way to the top of my glass, a slow, deliberate climb. Around me, my family performed their weekly ritual of happiness. White linen tablecloths, the clink of heavy silverware, the brittle, perfect smiles of people who knew their picture was being taken, even when it wasn't. We were celebrating my father's latest win, a big land deal he'd been bragging about for weeks. I was the only one at the table who knew it had been a catastrophe, a near bankruptcy that I had spent the last month cleaning up silently from my tiny apartment 3 towns away. I was the family's ghost, the one who fixed the cracks before anyone knew the foundation was breaking. My older brother, Mark, let out a loud laugh. "The Aspen trip is going to be epic this year," he announced to the table, before turning his gaze on me. His eyes held the easy entitlement of someone who'd never had to fix a thing in his life. "We'll need the family cabin, of course," he said. It wasn't a question. "Annie, you'll handle the bookings, right?" I felt the familiar weight settle on my shoulders. I gave a small, practiced nod. Handling things was my job. That's when my mother, Helen, made her move. She leaned in, her perfume suffocating me. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, a sound designed to carry across the entire table. She placed her perfectly manicured hand on mine. Her new sapphire bracelet glittered under the brunch tent lights. An obscene, gaudy thing. The very one I'd diverted funds to cover last Tuesday after she'd maxed out her card at the jeweler. She squeezed my hand, her rings digging into my skin. "You're so good to us, honey," she began. The table quieted. Every eye turned to us. This was a performance. "We just don't know what we'd do without you." She let the words hang in the air, heavy with false sentiment. Then came the knife, delivered with a syrupy smile. Her eyes scanned the faces of her audience. "Our family. I tell my friends all the time," she said, her voice dripping with a cruel, manufactured compassion. "You have to be kind to the lonely ones." My breath caught in my chest. Without pity, she finished, looking right at me. "You'd be alone." The words landed. A direct hit in the center of the silent table. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to her lap. My father cleared his throat and suddenly took a deep interest in his plate of salmon. Mark just stared, and for a second, I saw a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. They heard it. They all heard it. And they did nothing. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even pull my hand away from hers. I just looked at my mother, at the woman who saw me not as a daughter, but as a charity case she graciously sponsored. I held her gaze. And I smiled. It was a small, simple, private smile. It didn't reach my eyes. It was a smile that said, "I see you." It was a smile that said, "You have no idea what you've just done." She recoiled slightly, her own smile faltering. She was confused by the lack of tears. She had expected a scene, a quiet breakdown she could swoop in and manage, proving her point to everyone. She didn't get one. I slowly raised my glass and took a sip of the mimosa. It didn't taste like acid anymore. It tasted like fuel. That evening, I sat in front of my laptop, the screen illuminating my dark apartment. The voicemails could wait. First, there was work to do. My cursor hovered over a button, a single digital switch that controlled their entire world. Freeze all associated credit lines. I clicked it. It was the first domino. The power wasn't something I'd seized. It was given to me. It was a legacy handed down not with a gavel, but with a sigh. A memory hit me as I stared at the confirmation screen on my laptop. Me, 22 years old, standing in my grandfather's study. The air smelled of old books and bourbon. He was frail, his body failing, but his eyes were sharp. His hands shook as he pushed a heavy, leather-bound ledger across the polished desk. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "Your father sees money as applause," he'd rasped, his voice thin as paper. "And your mother sees it as a stage. They don't understand it's a foundation, Annie, and theirs is riddled with cracks." That was the day he made me the sole trustee of the family trust. It wasn't a gift. It was a burden. He was afraid, and he was asking me to stand guard. His final words to me weren't, "I love you." They were a command. Don't let them burn it all down. For 10 years I had honored that promise. I was the silent firewall between my family and their own ruin. Another memory surfaced, sharp and bitter. 2 years ago, my father's disastrous venture into commercial real estate. The barrage of calls from angry lenders. His voice on the phone, slick with a panic he tried to hide. "You handle the numbers, Annie," he'd said, his tone dismissive, like he was asking me to take out the trash. "Just make it go away." I spent an entire month in a legal nightmare, untangling liens and negotiating settlements. I used the trust's capital to patch the gaping holes in his ego. They never asked how I did it. They just sent me a generic edible arrangement with a cheap little balloon that said, "Thanks." A sharp ping from my laptop pulled me back to the present. An email. The subject line was in bold red letters. Invoice 7,832. Final notice. My own life. I'd forgotten about it for a moment. My interior design business. My one escape. The one thing that was supposed to be mine. I had a massive project on the line. A boutique hotel that could finally make my career. But a non-negotiable payment was due to a fabric supplier in Italy. By Wednesday, my personal cash flow was stretched to its limit until the hotel paid their first deposit. The irony was a physical weight in my chest. I was the gatekeeper to millions, yet I was sweating over a $30,000 invoice for my own dream. My family treated the trust like a bottomless ATM for bracelets and ski trips, while I meticulously budgeted every dollar just to survive. My mother's words echoed in the quiet of my apartment. "Without pity, you'd be alone." She thought I was nothing without them. The truth was, they were nothing without me, and they had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the wooden desk. A text from my brother Mark. "Hey, cabin concierge, Mom said you were acting weird. Just book the Aspen trip, use the Amex." He'd attached a photo of the family's platinum credit card, the one I had just turned into a useless piece of plastic. I ignored Mark's text. I just let it sit there, a monument to his own cluelessness. An hour later, my phone lit up with our mother's name. I watched the screen, my jaw tight, and let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the texts began. A rapid-fire assault on my screen. "Helen, Annie, Mark's card isn't working. He's trying to book the flights to Aspen." Another one, seconds later. "Helen, the concierge says the family account is frozen. Is there an issue?" I didn't reply. The silence was my only defense. Then, the final text. The one that made my blood run cold. "Helen, this is embarrassing. Fix it. Fix it. Not what's wrong. Not are you okay. Just an order. The command you give to a misbehaving appliance." For 10 years, I had been the appliance that always worked. My thumbs flew across the screen. I typed out a novel of rage and pain. A detailed explanation of years of their financial mismanagement, of my secret role as trustee, of her breathtaking cruelty at brunch. I wrote about the sapphire bracelet and the land deal, and my grandfather's dying wish. It was all there, a raw, bleeding confession. Then, I stopped. I stared at the wall of text. Explaining was a trap. It was an invitation for a fight I couldn't win. It would be twisted, used against me, proof of my instability. She didn't deserve an explanation. She deserved a consequence. Slowly, deliberately, I deleted it all. Every last word. My screen was blank again. I typed one word. A word I hadn't used with them in a decade. No. I hit send. My heart hammered against my ribs. The silence that followed was louder than any screaming match. It felt like I'd just pulled the pin on a grenade and was waiting for the explosion. It didn't take long. My phone rang again, almost instantly. My father this time. I declined the call. Then my aunt. Declined. Then my mother again, her name flashing with an angry urgency. Declined. The phone buzzed and rattled on the coffee table like a wounded thing. My eyes drifted to a small silver frame beside it. A photo of me and my grandfather, years ago. He had his arm around me, his smile knowing, kind. He knew this day would come. As the phone buzzed with yet another call from my mother, a new number flashed on the screen. One I didn't recognize. I hesitated, my stomach twisting. I expected another family ambush, a cousin or uncle calling to lecture me. I steeled myself and answered. Am I speaking with Anne? A calm, older voice asked. A voice of quiet authority. This is she, I whispered. Anne, this is Arthur Abernathy. I was your grandfather's attorney, and I am the executor of his estate. I froze. The world stopped. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Abernathy in years. Mr. Abernathy, I stammered. Is everything all right? There was a thoughtful pause on the other end of the line. I received an automated alert from the trust security protocol, he said gently. A full credit line freeze. It's a measure designed to trigger in case of, let's call it unusual activity. He paused again. I'm not calling to question you, Anne. I'm calling to check if you need support. He knew. He must have known all along what my grandfather had feared. Tears pricked my eyes for the first time all day. Not tears of sadness. Tears of overwhelming relief. I wasn't fighting them alone. Your grandfather, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice firm and kind, was a very smart man. He put several contingencies in place for a day like this. He called it the break glass protocol. The counterattack came on Tuesday. It wasn't a phone call. It was quieter and far more vicious. I was sitting in a small coffee shop downtown, trying to steal a moment of normalcy for myself. The smell of roasted coffee beans, the low murmur of conversations, it felt a world away from the silent war I was waging. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from my cousin Sarah, who had been at the brunch. The subject line just said, "Thinking of you." This is a lot. My hands grew cold as I opened it. It was a forwarded email. An email from my mother, sent to a massive list of family, friends, and half the city's social register. The subject line was a masterpiece of manipulation, a difficult family matter. Please keep Annie in your prayers. I felt the blood drain from my face. I started to read. She wrote of my sudden and alarming emotional breakdown, my erratic behavior, and how I was lashing out due to deep-seated stress. She never mentioned the trust. She never mentioned the money. Instead, she had reframed my financial lockdown as a mental health crisis. She has made some rash decisions that have unfortunately impacted the family. It's day-to-day logistics, she wrote, her words dripping with false concern. We are, of course, giving her the space she needs and trying to get her the help she so desperately deserves. It's just so hard to watch someone you love struggle like this. My stomach churned. She was painting herself as the caring, worried mother, and me as the unhinged, ungrateful child. Then came the final, brilliant stroke. We are particularly worried as we head into our annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala this Saturday, my biggest event of the year. Please, just keep her in your thoughts. She had weaponized my privacy. She had turned my strength into a sign of instability, and she had done it in front of everyone we knew. The fallout was immediate. As I sat there, staring at the screen, a new text popped up. It was from my aunt. It wasn't a question. It was a link to a therapist. Then another, from an old family friend. Hang in there. Your mother is a saint for putting up with all this. The narrative was set. I was the villain in my own story. I looked up at the strangers in the coffee shop, laughing, talking, completely unaware of the public execution happening on my phone screen. For a moment the old shame washed over me, a desperate, childish urge to call her, apologize, and make it all go back to the way it was. But then, I thought of my grandfather's tired eyes. I thought of the condescending pity in my mother's gaze as she delivered her insult at brunch. This wasn't a family misunderstanding. This was war. And she had just chosen the battlefield, the charity gala, her stage, her audience. She thought I would hide in shame. She thought I'd be too humiliated to ever show my face in that world again. She was wrong. I picked up my phone, my hand perfectly steady. I scrolled past the texts, past the email, and found the number I needed. It rang once. Abernathy, he answered. The break glass protocol you mentioned, I said, my voice as calm and cold as steel. Tell me everything. The next few days were silent, eerily silent. My family clearly believed their email had worked. They thought I had retreated in shame, that I was somewhere licking my wounds, broken. They left me alone, confident they had won the social war. They weren't giving me space, they were giving me time. I met Mr. Abernathy at his office on Wednesday. It was a world away from my family's loud, aesthetic-driven life. There were no gilded mirrors or designer furniture, just solid mahogany, shelves of leather-bound books, and the quiet weight of facts. He steepled his fingers and looked at me over his glasses, his eyes kind but serious. "Your mother has made a critical error, Anne," he said, his voice calm. "She has created a public spectacle. In doing so, she has given you the right to a public response." From his office, we went directly to the bank. The air in the vault was cold and still. A guard led us to a wall of brushed steel boxes. Mr. Abernathy produced a key, and I produced mine. They slid into the dual locks with a satisfying click. Inside the safe deposit box was a single, thick, leather-bound folder. It hadn't been opened since my grandfather's death. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted it out. It felt heavier than it should. Back in his office, Mr. Abernathy opened the folder to a specific page. He pointed to a clause, Section 8, subsection C. It was titled, in stark black letters, the Recklessness Clause. My grandfather, in clear, concise legal language, had outlined the exact circumstances under which full financial control, including the sale of assets, would fall to me. The trigger? Any action that jeopardized the core capital of the trust for non-essential, reputation-based, or frivolous expenditures. My mother's new sapphire bracelet, I thought, was practically a textbook example. "There's more," Mr. Abernathy said. He slid another document across the desk. It was a sworn affidavit, signed and notarized. It was from my father's former business manager, a good man who had quit in disgust years ago. At Mr. Abernathy's request, he had detailed every instance of financial mismanagement he had witnessed. It was a damning 5-page log of ego-driven decisions and reckless spending that had nearly sunk them a dozen times over. This wasn't my opinion. It was a fact. Just as I was absorbing the weight of the documents, my phone buzzed. An email? Not from my family. It was from the boutique hotel developers, the clients for my new design business. My heart leaped into my throat. The subject line read, "Contract approved and first installment sent. Miss Vance," the email began, "your proposal was, without a doubt, the most meticulously detailed and financially sound we have ever seen. We are thrilled to proceed. The first payment of $50,000 has been wired to your account." I stared at the screen. The very skills I had honed cleaning up my family's endless messes, my attention to detail, my financial diligence, had just secured my own future, my independence. The $30,000 fabric invoice was no longer a threat. It was a business expense I could now easily cover. I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't just the trustee of their fortune, I was the architect of my own. I took a deep breath, the first full breath I'd taken all week. I opened my texts and selected my mother's name. My fingers were steady. "I got your email," I typed. "I think it's time we all talked. I'll see you at the gala on Saturday. Let's clear the air." The ballroom was a sea of jewels and champagne, and my mother was the admiral of the fleet. She was in her element, floating from table to table, accepting hushed compliments on her silver gown, her perfect hair, and her bravery during such a difficult family time. The narrative she had spun was working perfectly. When she saw me walk in, clutching a simple leather folder, her eyes lit up with a look of triumphant pity. She thought I was there to surrender, to apologize in front of her entire court and beg to be let back in. I found a seat at a table near the back and simply watched. I felt the stares. I heard the whispers, the pointed looks, the sympathetic head tilts in my mother's direction. I let her have her moment. I let them all believe the lie. The climax of the evening was the live auction, followed by a pledge drive for the Children's Hospital. My mother took the stage, elegant and poised under the spotlight. "To kick us off," she announced, her voice resonating with practiced generosity, "my husband and I would like to pledge $50,000. The crowd erupted in applause. My mother smiled, a perfect, dazzling smile of a woman who had just proven her own virtue. She turned and tapped her credit card on the portable machine held by a nervous-looking volunteer. The volunteer frowned. She tapped it again. A small, awkward silence began to stretch. The applause faded. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," the volunteer whispered, her voice accidentally caught by the microphone. "It's been declined. Reveal number 1. A ripple of confusion went through the ballroom. My mother's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That's impossible," she hissed, snatching the card back. "Run it again." But no one was looking at the stage anymore. They were looking at my father's table. My brother, Mark, who was sitting beside him, let out a sharp curse. His face was pale. He shoved his phone into my father's face. From across the room, I knew exactly what it was, the Zillow alert. An hour before the gala, I had listed the Aspen cabin for sale. The listing was now live, sent to hundreds of interested buyers. Reveal number 2. My father shot to his feet so abruptly his chair screeched against the polished floor, a horrible jarring sound in the quiet room. The panic on their faces was no longer hidden. The performance was over. My mother's eyes scanned the room, desperate, until they landed on me. The confusion in them curdled into pure, unadulterated fury. She saw me then, truly saw me, and she strode from the stage, weaving through the tables directly toward me. The entire ballroom was now watching us. This was the scene she had wanted at brunch. Now she was getting it, but not on her terms. "What did you do?" she snarled, her voice low and vicious. When I didn't answer, she raised her voice, letting the entire room hear her. "You are ungrateful and unstable." She seethed, her carefully constructed mask of compassion shattering. "After everything we have done for you." I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "Done for me?" I asked, my own voice cutting through the silence like glass. "Or done in by me?" I let the question hang in the air. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Then I walked past her, toward the stage, and picked up the microphone the MC had left on the podium. "My mother is right," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the cavernous, silent room. "There is a difficult family matter. She's just confused about the details." I looked directly at her, at my father and brother who were now frozen by their table. "For 10 years I have been the sole trustee of my grandfather's estate, a role he gave me not as a gift, but to protect this family's legacy from the very people who created it." I placed the leather folder on the podium and opened it. "My mother mentioned I've made some rash decisions. Freezing the credit lines was not a rash decision. It was a direct response to the recklessness clause in the trust." I paused, letting them absorb the legal term. "Triggered by over $200,000 in frivolous, reputation-based spending in the last 6 months alone." Gasps rippled through the audience. "As for the Aspen cabin, the trust requires that all non-essential assets be liquidated to cover capital losses. Losses from my father's failed real estate deals 2 years ago. Losses I personally mitigated to prevent his bankruptcy." My father looked like he'd been punched. The story of his genius deal had just been publicly dismantled. "This is not an emotional breakdown," I said, my voice ringing with a decade of suppressed truth. "It is a legal and fiduciary audit, and I have the documentation to prove it." The avalanche. As if on cue, a figure stepped out of the shadows by the side of the stage. He was a man in a simple, well-tailored suit. "Everything Ms. Vance has stated is accurate," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice carrying the calm, irrefutable weight of the law. "As executor of the estate, I can confirm she is acting precisely as her grandfather instructed, and with my full legal support." I looked at my mother one last time. Her face was a mask of utter disbelief and public humiliation. The pity was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard, inescapable truth. I didn't wait for her response. I turned, walked off the stage, and headed for the exit, leaving the shambles of their reputation behind me in the stunned, deafening silence of the ballroom. I didn't watch the fallout. I didn't need to. The following week was a blizzard of voicemails and texts. They followed a predictable pattern. First came the anger, vicious and sharp. Then, confusion. Finally, the pleading began. Desperate, whining messages from my mother, my father, even Mark. I listened to none of them. Instead, I forwarded all communications from their numbers directly to Mr. Abernathy. My only reply to them was a single, formal email. In it, I outlined the new rules. All funding requests would now require a formal application to be submitted in writing. They would be reviewed quarterly. The family ATM was closed for business. Permanently. I was sitting in my living room a few days later, the late afternoon sun, streaming through the windows, making patterns on the hardwood floor. I was finalizing the design schematics for the hotel lobby, my mind completely absorbed in the work. My business was flourishing. The hotel developers had already recommended me for another project. My work, my talent, was creating my security now, not a dusty ledger in a bank vault. My phone screen lit up. It was a text from Mr. Abernathy. It was a photo of him and his wife, smiling on their porch, holding up 2 glasses of wine. The caption read, "Dinner at 7? We're opening the good wine to toast your grandfather. He would be so proud." A feeling of warmth spread through my chest, deep and real. I wasn't alone. I had a family built on respect, not obligation. I looked around my apartment. Every piece of furniture, every color on the walls, was something I had chosen. It was a space that reflected who I was, not who my family had always told me I should be. On the coffee table was a simple glass vase with one perfect pink peony, a flower I'd bought for myself that morning, just because I liked it. My mother's words from that Sunday brunch came back to me, echoing in the quiet of my peaceful home. "Without pity, you'd be alone." She was wrong. I wasn't alone. I was free, and in the quiet hum of my own life, I had finally found what I truly belonged to, myself. The voicemails piled up. I never answered. Did this story resonate with you? Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.